Hey everyone, welcome to Aussie Footy Chats, episode 5, Crows Trade Chats. So today, I'm going to talk about the Adelaide Football Club, the Adelaide Crows, and we're going to talk about who they brought in, who they traded, what picks they have, and what happened. So, after losing both finals this year, unfortunately Adelaide went out in straight sets after finishing on top of the ladder. So it was a bit of a revaluation. And so the list managers obviously have tried to target to other players and stabilise their list and also add picks going into November's draft. So I'm going to get into detail who they brought in first. I think that's probably the most important one. So the Crows traded in, so they got Finbar Marley from North Melbourne. So Finbar Marley is a tall key position player who plays up forward and played 10 games for the Kangaroos, North Melbourne. He's only 22, so he's quite young. It was a surprise in the actual trade period week. No one was expecting that. None of the experts sort of picked it. It happened on the last day. And so just to explain a bit about Finbar and his family. So his dad is from the US. He's American. He played college basketball for Yale. And also, once he finished college, he had a tryout at the New Jersey Nets in the 1989 preseason and unfortunately was cut, which it's quite hard to make the NBA. So he come over to Australia and he played in the NBL for the 36ers, which is the Adelaide side in the basketball. And his father won the 1994 NBL championship, and also his sister plays basketball in Australia in the women's side. She won a FIBA bronze medal for the World Championships in the basketball, and also has played for the Adelaide basketball team previously, and so they're quite a athletic family, which is quite cool. So Finbar is a tall player, key position player, probably can pinch hit in the ruck, be a second ruckman, and can clunk a few marks up forward. He had that game with North Melbourne this year, where he caught the ball at a nice sort of mark towards the end of the game and went to line up for his kick, and unfortunately took longer than 30 seconds and had to rush to kick, resulting in a behind, I believe. And North Melbourne lost to, I think it was Essendon that game. So that was a game in about the middle of the year last year. He went on to play 10 games. So I'll sort of add in so Adelaide sent pick 57 and a 4th round pick in 2026 to North Melbourne, which the Crows received Finbar Marley and North Melbourne's pick 64. So he's a South Australian product, played 10 games, and can be added depth in the tall department for the Crows. The Crows have quite a tall forward line, 3-headed monster forward line. So that's with Tex Walker, Riley Thilthorpe, and Darcy Fogarty. So those three tall players are their key position players. And Tex Walker's getting older at the moment. They also have Scott Welsh's son that's coming through, which will probably be more of a replacement for Tex. That's what I would assume. That's more like for like, because Finbar is more of your tall athletic build. He's a big guy, where they're probably more of your mid to tall sort of forwards, so they're not quite as tall. So that's a bit about that and sort of who they brought in. And I'm going to explain now who they tried to target in the trade period and why they weren't successful and what is going to happen after that. So we'll start off with Callum Archie, who's a Brisbane player, dual premiership player. He's a utility. He can play up forward, on the wing, or a defensive role. or he can play a defensive wing role like he did in the grand final. Play it on Oliver Dempsey and shut him down. So that's the player that they wanted to go for. And also he wants to play for the Adelaide Football Club, where the number 23, because of that man right there, Andrew McLeod. So that's just a little bit of details on the reason why. And so Adelaide's main priority target was the dual premiership player, which a deal was not struck between Adelaide and Brisbane, with the Brisbane Lions asking for Adelaide's first round pick, which is pick number 16, with Adelaide offering pick 48. And Brisbane felt like that wasn't exactly the deal that they wanted. They wanted a higher second round pick. So Adelaide also wanted to offload pick 48 and 55 in a package to try and get a higher second round pick to trade with Brisbane, but wasn't able to find a deal on the market with other clubs. So they couldn't quite get a deal with other clubs to bump these picks up, which would have maybe satisfied the Brisbane Football Club. And so what happened was the Brisbane Football Club stuck to what they wanted in a deal, and they were actually happy to let Calamachi walk to the pre-season draft. So that being said, Brisbane sort of get nothing for Calamachi, which even if they struck a deal, they would have got pick 48, for example, or they could have had a later round pick, which I'll go through Adelaide's picks in a minute once I finish through these talks. So from Calamachi's perspective, he's probably pretty upset because Brisbane didn't want to do a deal. If you look from his perspective, he's done a great service. He's a dual premiership player. He's done it all for that club, like all the other players on the list. And so he wanted to make a trade and move to Adelaide with his family. So I can sort of feel for the bloke a bit. I can understand Brisbane's logic. They wanted more value for his trade, but also they're going to walk away with without an extra pick and a player leaving. So those fallouts can happen amongst players and clubs, particularly with a guy that's a premiership player. The Crows are looking to add that to the list, with the experience that he's got, with going out the way they did in the finals in straight sets. That's what we call, if you're finishing the top four in the AFL and you lose your first game, you get a second chance. You lose that, they call that straight sets. So that just explains that, if you didn't quite know what I meant by that, which is not a thing that you sort of want to have. Both Adelaide sides have done that in recent sort of history in the last 5 years, so it's not just the Adelaide Football Club. So it's not a good record to have, and so they've gone to look to bring some extra experience in, and that makes total sense. But the deal fell through, making Calamachi walk to the draft. So now the Adelaide Crows will have to select him with their pick, and I'll go through that in a second. After their first round pick, is the first round pick they don't want to use, because they would have traded that to Brisbane for that, and that's what the original asking price was. So that being said, their sort of first picks about the 48 after their first round pick, and also they've got the pre-season draft, which is for the rookies after that, and there may be Port Adelaide swooping in with pick 13 before the Crows. But that being said, I think the Crows will use pick 48 in the national draft, which is the main draft, and they could just pick him through there. And I think Port have a pick 49, which is above that, so the Crows will pick that. But also, that being said, I believe the Port Adelaide Football Club will trade both of their two picks that are remaining in the draft. I'll explain that when I get to Port Adelaide. So they want draft capital for next year. So just to all the Adelaide fans out there, I believe that you guys will get Calamachi. I know Port are looking at it, and they're going to, depending on how many points they need to build up for next year, then they will reevaluate their list. And because Calamachi wants to come to Adelaide, and there's two teams within Adelaide in South Australia, and that's Port Adelaide and the Crows, which we're currently talking about, the Adelaide Football Club. So, yeah, I don't think Port will go for him because they want draft capital next year, but if they have enough draft capital, they may grab Calamachi, but I highly doubt it because they have priorities with Dougie Cochran and a few father-son selections. His father did play for Port, but not enough games. You have to play X amount of games to qualify for father-son. So that's enough said through there. So, yeah, he's going to have to go to the draft. Crows will have to select him and use a pick. And so they kept their first round pick. And so they'll go to the draft with a first round pick. And now I'll explain another couple players that they went for. And this one I'll start with is Christian Petrarca, who's at the Melbourne Football Club. He's 29. He has 4 years left on his deal, which was to 2029. And the Crows offered pick 16 plus pick 55 because they were trying to offload pick 48 to the Brisbane Lions. So they were trying to package up a deal which could have included 48 and 55. And so they put the package together to try offload picks and also a first rounder to Melbourne, which the Melbourne Football Club wanted a higher first round pick and probably didn't like that the second round picks were so low. So Adelaide could have potentially put a package together to offload those picks to try to get a better second round pick, but while also trying to get Calamachi. It was quite a balancing act for the Adelaide Crows. So the deal fell through, but also Petrarca, from reports, what we've heard, Petrarca did fly into Adelaide. He did talk to the Adelaide Football Club, which is probably toured the facilities. Whether he went for a medical or not is unknown information at this time. So he did have quite a good chat. I believe there's rumours that his management wanted an extra year added on top of his deal. So he'd been 35 years old, and also he wanted the current money that he's on, which is 1.2 million. So the Adelaide Football Club probably wasn't too impressed by that and probably didn't want to have the extra year added on at that money. That being said, that could have been a rumour. So we're not quite sure. But we definitely know he came to the Adelaide Crows and flew into Adelaide and had a meeting and then flew off to the Gold Coast, which was the club that he has been traded to, which I'll later explain. So yeah, that explains the Christian Petrarca situation. Adelaide looking for a gun midfielder, which would have been a blockbuster trade for the Adelaide Crows, adding more depth into their midfield. He's a big-bodied midfielder who can play up forward and play in the midfield. Christian Petrarca, Norm Smith medalist, premiership player for the Melbourne Football Club, and arguably one of their best players. So Melbourne were looking to move him on and sort of restart their list with the new coach. I'll explain that a bit later with the Melbourne Football Club's chats and explain their positions on things. And so yeah, that was just Christian Petrarca and the Adelaide saga that didn't happen. So we'll move on to Riley Sanders now, which is a Western Bulldogs player. He's contracted till 2026, and his brother plays here for Nord in the SANFL, and the Adelaide Football Club had a chat about trying to contact him and the Bulldogs and make a trade, which the Bulldogs didn't want to initiate. There were talks that they may have asked for Jordan Butts, which is a key position defender at the Crows, and one of their big fullbacks, big tall guy who's a defender. And so yeah, his brother plays at Nord. They're a Tasmanian product. So Riley Sanders and his brother is from Tasmania. He's only a young lad. He was only in the draft a couple of years ago. It was a high draft round, a high draft pick, and went in the first round. And so, he's a developing player, and with the Tasmanian Football Club coming into the competition in the next couple of years, I would assume with his contract coming up at 2026, he'll definitely be looking to probably moving back to Tasmania. I would assume if Tasmania was serious and they wanted a good young player who's only in his early 20s at this time, by the time they come in, who can carry the club, that's automatic. But the Adelaide Crows did look at him because the connection between Nord in the South Australian Football League, National Football League, the SANFL. So that's what they went with, and unfortunately got knocked back and no deal was done. But they inquired also about Will Day, who plays for the Hawthorn Football Club, who's had a few injuries but can be a star player. Started off the season as arguably the best player this year before his foot injury. So he's from South Australia. The Crows just asked. There was no more chats than that. Hawthorn would have shut that down straight away because he's one of their best players. So that was very much briefly just chatted about and was instantly stopped, and Hawthorn has said a flat out no. So there are the sort of players that were talked about. Jordan Butts was talked about in other sides in Victoria that needed a key position player in the defence like the Bulldogs. And I'll give a quick summary of what the list manager, the head of list management at the Adelaide Football Club, Adam Kelly. So I'll just run down with what he said here. They improved the draft hand slightly by gaining pick 64. And Adam Kelly has emphasised that post the trade period that the club is confident in our core group and will rely on internal development plus first round pick and others to contend in this year's draft. And in the preseason draft, we're looking to get Calamachi with their picks. So they're happy with keeping their core group of players. They seem to add in a depth player for height, which is smart and important in case they get an injury to one of their key position players. And also, they've pretty happy to develop the players they've got on their list. They're like I said, with Walsh and a few of the younger midfielders that they've got, like Draper, who was a high draft pick last year, who's from South Adelaide. He'll be a gun player, and he'll develop over this summer, and will push for a spot in the 22. And then eventually be on the playing ground in the 18. So that's what he'll push for. That's what they mean by development in their players, and that's important. It's good that they've got a player in that's quite young and tall. They've got a few good young players that they want to develop, and they didn't get rid of a first round draft pick, which they've kept. They're going into this year's draft, which has a lot of strong South Australian talent, and they can get a good player. So I'll just explain my sort of thoughts about what they could have done as well. Lee Kalir, key position player as a defender, was going to go to St Kilda, but a deal fell through, which I'll explain later in the St Kilda chats. And so they could have went for Lee Kalir, but they didn't go for him and opted to keep their later round picks. And so they thought they could offload them for a better deal to get Calamachi, which they could have potentially offloaded that because Lee Kalir is a South Australian man. So they could have got a key position player just to add in their defense. I know they kept Jordan Butts. They just look a bit light down back. I know that Mark Keane and Josh Royal actually played quite good and almost was almost was All Australian. So they've kept them, and they could have added a key position player, another one. So could have got two this year, which, you never know with injuries. If they lose one of their key backmans, they could have had Likalia there. They might play Finbar Marley as a defender. That's always a possibility. But he did look quite good up forward and clunked a few good marks. If he works on his kicking, he could be an asset. So that's just a little bit of a summary on that. They did go for a star midfielder, but unfortunately didn't get one. So it was not a failure, but they've added in a player. They've kept their first round draft pick. So Crows fans, I think, should be happy about that. And they didn't sort of sell the farm to get an older player to bring in their midfield. They could develop Draper to maybe play a role. Different type player to Petrarca. They have a few big inside midfielders like Barry, who had a better year this year, but isn't up to that sort of standard of like a Petrarca type player. But unfortunately, that's what costs teams to get those sort of players. And if you don't have the draft capital to give to Melbourne, for example, they just won't do the deal, and they've done a deal with another club. So I'll just go through what picks they have. So after the trade period ended, the Crows ended up with pick 16, which is a first round pick. The second round pick at 48, which we talked about. Round 3, pick 55. And also round 3, pick 64, which was from North Melbourne in the Finbar Marley trade. Round 4 picks, they have 2 on that, so 73 and 75. Round 5, they have pick 93. And round 6, they've got pick 111. So that's just their picks that they've got. I've gave a quick brief summary and what picks they have. They rated them about a C, but I'm not really big on giving trade ratings at the moment because trades take a while to figure out who won or how they should be graded. They were graded lower because they didn't kick Calamachi in the trade period, and they're going to have to get it through the draft, so you could probably bump that up a bit more. If they get him in the preseason draft, which may cost them less than what they originally wanted, they could probably use pick 48 still in the draft, or they could package up pick 55 and pick 48 and bump it up the draft. They can still exchange picks up to the national draft. So yeah, that being all said, they've got a few picks. I know a lot of them are probably later round picks. They've got a first round pick. They go into the draft, they can get pretty good SA talent. If an SA talent slips late, they could even get that talent that's gone later. So it's quite interesting time for the Adelaide Football Club after missing out on finals for the last 7 years and climbing back up the ladder to finish first this year, and then unfortunately going out in straight sets. They get a first round draft pick. They'll hopefully get Callum Archie through the draft, which will improve their list. So overall, they kept their players. They got a first round draft pick. They'll potentially get Callum Archie and go on to develop their future players and keep their core group without losing any key position players or midfield stars. And they go into 2026 looking like they should probably play finals again and have developed players, and quite exciting time for the club. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I tried to give a very non-biased view and being fair. I'll do this with all the clubs. They'll be quite similar structured to how I've done this. And I'll explain what I think they could get, what they could add, and so forth. There also is another player, Tom Mitchell, that's delisted by Collingwood. They could add in as a depth player in the midfield. I'll probably say that about a lot of clubs that are in the finals that didn't quite do so well or make it. So I think he'll be sort of shopped around to a few clubs. Whether he gets picked up or not, it's another question. Just wanted to add that in. I'm trying to think of other players that are delisted or could come to the Crows. There's not too many that pop up into my mind, but I believe, Callum Archie will be a good list addition while keeping a first round draft pick. And that's the Adelaide Football Club's trade chats. I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe and enjoy the weekend. Stay safe and enjoy the weekend and take care. Thank you.